Hello guys, and welcome back to another MCreator procedure tutorial. So today what we're going to be looking at is the projectile blocks, which is found under the projectiles procedures tab. So you'll be able to find this on most of the most recent versions. I'm not sure exactly when it was added, but we have a bunch of different blocks down here that we have access to. There's a couple getter blocks and there's a couple setter blocks, so we'll be covering those today. So let's quickly take a look at the setter blocks, which are these ones right here. So what we have is one that is doing it in the name of a specific entity. So this is allowing you to run a projectile to be shot from an entity. The other one is like a world update. This one would be used more similarly to things like the dispenser or droppers and stuff like that. So you would have this kind of mechanic for a world event where the entity one would be more specifically for things like entities like skeletons shooting arrows and stuff like that. So that's your two different types of blocks. They have different properties on their own. So you have the option to select a particular entity. You also have the speed of the projectile, and you also have the inaccuracy. If you leave this to 0, then it will go in a straight line until it basically falls down. And then for the block one, you have from a position for XYZ. So you can offset this from a block or a position in the world. And then you have with direction. So this is your direction X, Y, and Z. So this is basically your controller where you're going to be shooting the projectile. Direction X would be basically based on the world direction. So what's basically going on with that, I'll just open up the paint program and kind of give you an idea of how things are set up. So let's get the font size a little bit bigger. So north is basically negative Z, and then you have east, which is positive X, and you also have your south, which is positive Z coordinates. So this would be a positive number. And then you have west, which is your negative X, and then your up and down are as to be expected. So I'll just write those quickly over on this side here. So up is positive Y, and your down is negative Y. So those are your general directions when you're working with world. When you're working with this right now, this is all going in a positive direction. So it would be going to the east, south, and up direction from where this particular block is located. If you wanted it to go somewhere like north, then you would basically set something like 0, and maybe you would want it to actually go up. So you would have like negative Z or -1 for the direction. So this would allow you to kind of arch it towards the north. And then you also have two other parameters at the end of this particular block, which allows you to control the speed and inaccuracy for this particular projectile as well. Okay, so let's look at the setter blocks now, because these ones are all different. They're not the same, and they have different uses. So for example, we have one for potions. So this one allows you to set lingering or splash potions, and also basically what kind of potion type. So your custom potions will also show up in this list. And then you have with acceleration, and then AX, AY, and AZ. So this is your acceleration, basically motion. So this will allow you to set kind of like the speed, I'm guessing. And then you also can specify what entity has basically shot this projectile. So this is used in some mechanics, like if you are wanting aggressive mob or a neutral mob to attack a player or an entity that actually shot the projectile, you could replace this with the entity that has basically shot the projectile. So by default, it's set to no entity, so it won't become aggroed if the projectile is hit, so it'll just kind of stay neutral. But if you wanted it to, say, attack the player that has basically shot it, you could, or the entity, you could do something like this, and that would work too. All right, so the other one down here is arrow type. So this allows you to select what kind of arrow. Your custom projectiles will also show up in this list. You also have with damage, so basically the damage amount, the knockback amount, piercing, if it goes through an entity or how many entities it can go through. The shooter, which is exactly the same as what we described before. If the projectile is on fire or shows particles. And this one here allows you to set what kind of pickup mode it's basically allowed for. Now, if you're not familiar with like arrows and stuff, like skeletons, they disallow you to pick up the arrows from the skeleton. But if it's your own arrow, then you can usually pick it up from the particular player, like if it's from a player specifically. And then there's also one for creative only if you can pick it up. So there's a few different options here for your projectiles. And then we have fireball of type, and then there's a couple different fireball types. I don't think this is actually listed for your custom projectiles. I'm not sure 100%. It might be show up in here if you have custom ones, but I would probably think that would be more fall under the arrow one. And then you have acceleration and shooter, so it's the same thing as basically up here with the lingering potions. And then we also have one called throwable projectiles. This is things for kind of miscellaneous for the game, like eggs, ender pearls, experience bottles, llama spit, and basically snowballs. So those are all the different types of things that you can actually be throwing, and it just has a shooter property for that particular one. So with that being said, all you would really end up doing is basically putting this particular block into the socket for the actual procedure here. So it'll get a little bit longer. You might even want to do this in line so it's a little bit easier to read. And then you can basically put these blocks into these particular ones here. I'm going to just kind of demonstrate quickly of what this can do and how we can actually control some of the things. So let's go ahead and close some of this stuff here, and we're just going to use the arrow one for this. And we're going to go ahead and make this the entity that basically shoots, and then we're going to allow it, and I think that's all we need to do for this particular one. We also need to select an arrow type, so we'll select that. Damage is 5, knockback is 1, piercing, we'll leave piercing alone for now, and we'll enable pickup type. So basically this will allow us to pick up the arrow. And we're going to just bind this to a procedure trigger when we right click with an item, and we're going to select the item that we're basically right clicking with, and this is just going to be a stick for this demonstration, and then we're going to shoot the projectile based on that. So that should shoot it in the direction that the player is currently facing. So let's go ahead and test this out. Alright, so I'm in my test world, and we'll go ahead and grab a stick from here. And we'll just shoot the projectile a few times. You might notice that it's coming from our head because that's the position where the actual entity is looking. So it's always going to be kind of where the player is looking. So let's go ahead and see if we can take out one of these cows here. Okay. So that is extremely powerful for what settings we did have. Now, can we actually pick up the arrows? So we can pick up the arrows, and it doesn't look like there is any limit for if there's arrows being removed from our inventory. So we would want to also make sure that we remove an arrow from our inventory and get the put damage onto the item if it has damage and stuff like that. So that's basically it in a nutshell. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe. I have a Discord server if you're interested in joining, and we have a couple help channels for the community to ask other members in the community for questions and stuff like that. Great for little questions about procedure blocks and other forms of questions, but definitely consider joining that if you're interested. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace out.